My mother-in-law demanded separate budgets after my husband said I contribute nothing. When she walked into the kitchen on Sunday, her scream made the neighbors run outside. I'm Emma Chen, 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought my marriage to Daniel was built on mutual respect and partnership. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5, and I believed we understood each other. I believed his family respected me. I was wrong about both. It started on a Tuesday evening. Daniel came home from work with that particular expression I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant his mother had been in his ear again. Patricia, my mother-in-law, had a gift for planting seeds of discontent that would bloom into full arguments by dinner time. "We need to talk about finances," Daniel announced, dropping his briefcase by the door with more force than necessary. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing contracts for my freelance consulting work. "What about them?" "Mom made some good points today." He loosened his tie, not meeting my eyes. "She said it's not fair that you get to enjoy the lifestyle I provide without contributing equally." The words hit me like cold water. "Excuse me? You work from home, Emma. You have all this free time while I'm at the office for 10 hours a day. Mom's right. You don't understand real struggle. You're privileged." I closed my laptop slowly, my hands suddenly steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Privileged. Don't get defensive," he said, finally looking at me. "I'm just saying maybe we should have separate finances from now on. You handle your expenses, I handle mine. It'll be more fair." Patricia had been pushing for this conversation for months, ever since she'd retired and apparently decided her new hobby would be scrutinizing every aspect of our marriage. She'd made comments about my easy life, about how I had it made being married to her successful son. Daniel worked in corporate finance, pulling in a solid 6-figure salary. What Patricia didn't know, what neither of them apparently knew, was exactly how our household budget actually worked. "Separate finances," I repeated, my voice carefully neutral. "You want complete financial independence." "Exactly." He looked relieved that I wasn't arguing. "We split everything down the middle. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, everything. We each pay our own way. No more questions about who's pulling their weight." I could have explained right then. I could have pulled out the spreadsheets, the bank statements, the truth about who actually paid for what in our household, but something in his tone, that echo of his mother's condescension, made me choose a different path. "All right," I said simply. Daniel blinked, clearly surprised by my easy agreement. "Really? Just like that?" "Just like that." I smiled at him, and it wasn't a kind smile. "Separate budgets starting immediately. You pay your bills, I pay mine." "Great." He looked almost suspicious at how smoothly this had gone. "I'll set up a shared document where we can track the household expenses and split them 50-50. "Perfect." I reopened my laptop. "When you create that spreadsheet, make sure it's detailed. Every single expense, Daniel. I want complete transparency about who pays for what." That night, I lay awake while Daniel slept soundly beside me, probably dreaming of his newfound financial independence. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did Patricia, but they would learn soon enough. The next morning, I started implementing the separate finances arrangement with surgical precision. When Daniel created his tracking spreadsheet and shared it with me, I studied it carefully. He'd listed his contributions: half the mortgage, half the utilities, half the property taxes. Very neat, very equal on paper. What he hadn't included, what he apparently didn't even consider, were the dozens of other expenses that kept our household running. The housekeeper who came twice a week, the landscaping service, the premium cable and streaming packages, the high-speed internet plan, the quarterly pest control, the water softener rental, the trash service, the home warranty, the HOA fees, and those were just the regular household bills. He also hadn't accounted for groceries beyond his own specific needs. His protein powder and meal prep containers, those would be his now. The fully stocked pantry I maintained, mine. The wine collection he liked to serve when we had guests, his to replenish. The fresh flowers I bought every week that he claimed made the house feel welcoming, my expense, my choice whether to continue. But the real oversight, the one that would matter most, was what he'd left off the list entirely. You see, Daniel had always been the face of our finances. He went to the office, brought home the paychecks, paid the bills through his account. It was a system that worked, or so everyone thought, including his mother, who praised him for being such a good provider. What Patricia didn't know, what Daniel seemed to have conveniently forgotten, was that 5 years ago when we bought this house, my inheritance from my grandmother had provided the entire down payment, $200,000, that had made it possible for us to buy in this neighborhood, in this school district, in a house that impressed everyone who visited. That same inheritance had also covered the full renovation of the kitchen, bathrooms, and basement. Another $150,000 that had transformed this house from a decent property into something Daniel's parents bragged about to their friends. But I'd never corrected anyone when they praised Daniel for providing such a beautiful home. I'd never mentioned my contribution when Patricia went on about her son's success. It hadn't seemed important to claim credit. We were a team, or so I thought. I spent Wednesday quietly documenting everything. Every bill, every service, every subscription, every expense that made our life comfortable. I made spreadsheets that would have impressed Daniel's corporate colleagues. I gathered statements and receipts. I prepared for what was coming. Thursday, I started making changes. First, I called the housekeeper. "Hi, Maria. I need to pause our service for a while. I'll let you know when we're ready to resume." Maria sounded concerned. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Chen?" "Everything's fine," I assured her. "Just some changes in our household budget." Next, I contacted the landscaping company and canceled our weekly service. Then the premium cable package downgraded to basic. The wine delivery subscription Daniel loved, canceled. The high-end gym membership we both used but I'd been paying for, suspended. I kept meticulous records of each cancellation, each change. This wasn't about being petty. This was was about truth, about financial transparency, about ensuring that separate finances meant truly separate finances. Friday evening, Daniel noticed the first change. Why didn't Maria come this week? He asked, looking at the kitchen counters that were clean but not spotless, not the way Maria left them. I canceled the service, I said casually, chopping vegetables for my dinner. Just my dinner. I'd stopped preparing meals for both of us. It's not a household necessity. If you want a housekeeper, you can hire one with your budget. He stared at me. You canceled Maria? Separate finances, Daniel. You said so yourself. Maria costs $600 a month. That's not a basic household expense like mortgage or utilities. If you want that service, you pay for it. I could see him calculating, probably realizing for the first time what that $600 a month had been providing. The spotless floors, the organized closets, the bathrooms that sparkled, the sheets that were always fresh. The lawn looks shaggy, he said, changing tactics. I canceled the landscaping service too. $450 a month, not a necessity. If you want the yard maintained, you can hire someone. His face was reddening now. Emma, this is ridiculous. Is it? I turned to face him fully, knife still in hand. You wanted separate finances. You wanted complete independence. You wanted to ensure everything was fair and equal. I'm just following through on what you asked for. I meant splitting the actual household bills. And we are. Mortgage, basic utilities, property taxes, just like you listed in your spreadsheet. Everything else is individual choice. Choose what you want to pay for, Daniel. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He couldn't. Not without admitting that separate finances maybe weren't such a great idea after all. Not without admitting that maybe his mother didn't understand our household budget as well as she thought she did. Saturday morning, he discovered the cable had been downgraded. No more premium sports package, no more HBO, no more streaming bundles. My game's not on, he shouted from the living room. The sports package is an extra $240 a month, I called back from my home office. Not a necessity. If you want it, feel free to pay for it yourself. I heard him stomping around, probably trying to figure out how to subscribe to services he'd never had to think about before. His credit card would work just fine, I was sure. By Saturday evening, our house felt different. Not quite empty, but definitely less comfortable. The flowers that usually brightened the entryway were gone. They'd been my expense all along. The premium coffee pods he liked had run out, and I'd bought only my preferred brand to replace them. The hand soap in the bathrooms was now the cheap dollar store version instead of the luxury brand I'd always purchased. Small changes, barely noticeable individually, but together they created an atmosphere of austerity that hadn't existed before. Sunday morning arrived, and with it, the regular weekly lunch with Daniel's parents. Patricia and James came over every Sunday without fail, had done so for the entire 5 years we'd lived in this house. It was tradition, Patricia said. It was family time, she insisted. It was really just her opportunity to inspect our home and our marriage, and offer unsolicited advice about both. They're coming at noon, Daniel reminded me that morning, looking nervous. Maybe we should postpone? The house isn't really ready for company. Why isn't it ready? I asked innocently. We have furniture, we have dishes. What else do we need? The place isn't clean like it usually is. Then clean it, I suggested. You have until noon. I watched him realize that he'd never actually cleaned the house for his parents' visits. Maria had always ensured everything was perfect. Now Maria was gone, and the responsibility fell to him. He spent the next 2 hours frantically vacuuming, wiping counters, and trying to make the bathrooms presentable. I worked in my office, checking emails and ignoring his increasingly frustrated sighs from the other rooms. At 11:30, I started preparing lunch, but not the elaborate spread Patricia had come to expect. No roasted chicken with herb butter, no homemade sides and fresh bread. Today's menu would be simple: sandwiches and a bagged salad. If Daniel wanted something more impressive for his parents, he was welcome to prepare it himself. At precisely noon, Patricia and James arrived. I heard Patricia's heels clicking on the walkway, heard her comment about the overgrown lawn, heard Daniel's defensive response that he'd been busy. Emma, Patricia called out in that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. We're here. I walked to the entryway to greet them. Patricia was wearing her usual Sunday outfit, designer label, and perfectly coordinated. The uniform of a woman who'd spent her life cultivating the appearance of success. James followed behind her, quieter as always, letting his wife lead. The yard needs attention, Patricia announced instead of hello. It's starting to look unkempt. Daniel's handling the yard from now on, I said pleasantly. Part of our new separate finances arrangement. Her eyes lit up with what looked like satisfaction. Oh, wonderful. Daniel told me you two had finally agreed to a more equitable financial structure. It's about time, if you ask me. You've been coasting for far too long. I smiled and said nothing. Let her think what she wanted. For now, something smells different, Patricia commented, sniffing the air as she walked toward the kitchen. What are you making for lunch? Sandwiches, I said. She stopped walking. Sandwiches. Yes, turkey and cheese. There's a bagged salad, too. Patricia turned to stare at me as if I'd announced we were serving dog food. Sandwiches? Emma, we always have a proper meal on Sundays. We always had a proper meal when I was paying for the groceries and spending 3 hours cooking, I corrected gently. Under the new separate finances arrangement, elaborate Sunday lunches aren't in my budget. If Daniel wants to prepare something more substantial for you, he's welcome to use his grocery budget. The silence that followed was exquisite. Patricia's face went through several color changes, settling on an unhealthy purple. James looked confused. Daniel looked like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. I see, Patricia said, her voice tight. Well, I suppose sandwiches will be adequate. We moved to the kitchen, and that's when everything changed. Patricia walked through the doorway, took 2 steps inside, and stopped dead. Her eyes went wide, her mouth fell open, and then she released a scream that could probably be heard in the next county. The neighbors neighbors actually ran outside, thinking someone was being murdered. What Patricia saw when she walked into my kitchen was this: empty counters where expensive appliances used to sit, bare walls where decorative shelving had been, missing cabinet doors that revealed mostly empty shelves, and taped to the refrigerator, a single piece of paper with itemized receipts. But the scream wasn't about any of that. The scream came from what she saw on the kitchen table, a neat stack of documents I'd carefully arranged that morning. Property deeds, renovation receipts, bank statements, all highlighted and annotated. 5 years of financial truth laid out in black and white. "What is this?" Patricia gasped, her hand clutching her chest dramatically. "Daniel, what has she done to your kitchen?" "My kitchen, actually," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "Technically my house. Well, mostly mine. Should we sit down and review the documents? I think there's been some confusion about our household budget, and since we're doing separate finances now, it's important everyone understands who actually owns what." Daniel's face had gone sheet white. "Emma, what are you doing?" "Providing the financial transparency you asked for." I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Please, Patricia, James, sit. Let me walk you through everything." James sat immediately, looking more curious than angry. Patricia remained standing, her eyes darting between the documents on the table and her son's panicked face. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, but she sat down slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. I picked up the first document, the property deed. "When Daniel and I bought this house 5 years ago, we needed a 20% down payment. That was $200,000. Daniel, would you like to explain where that money came from?" He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "Emma's grandmother," he mumbled. "I'm sorry. What was that?" I asked, knowing full well he'd never told his parents this detail. "Your grandmother left you money," he said louder, looking miserable. Patricia's expression flickered with something, surprise, maybe a hint of embarrassment, but she recovered quickly. "Well, that was a lovely wedding gift, but surely it wasn't a wedding gift," I interrupted. "My grandmother died when I was 23, 4 years before Daniel and I even met. That inheritance was mine alone. I chose to use it as our down payment. I chose to invest in our future together. But it was my money, Patricia, not Daniel's." I set down the deed and picked up a thick folder of receipts. "Now, let's discuss the renovations. When we moved in, this house needed significant work. The kitchen was from 1973. The bathrooms had original fixtures. The basement was unfinished. Daniel, what was the budget for renovations?" "I don't remember exactly," he hedged. "Let me refresh your memory. $152,437. I opened the folder, showing receipt after receipt. Every contractor payment, every material purchase, every design consultation, all paid from my personal account. My inheritance funded every beautiful detail that Patricia has been bragging about to her bridge club for the past 5 years. The room was completely silent except for the ticking of the wall clock, the one I'd bought for $79 to replace the builder-grade plastic one that had been here originally. "This is absurd," Patricia finally said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Married couples share assets. What's yours is his, what's his is yours. That's how marriage works." "Exactly what I thought," I agreed, until 3 days ago, when Daniel decided we needed separate finances because I contribute nothing and don't understand real struggle, so I've simply separated what's mine from what's his. Seems fair, doesn't it? I spread out more documents across the table: bank statements, payment confirmations, subscription records. "Let's continue. Maria, our housekeeper, $600 a month, paid from my account for 5 years. Total, $36,000. The landscaping service, $450 a month, also my account. 5 years, $27,000. Patricia's face was losing color now, matching her son's pale complexion. "Home warranty, $1,800 annually. Mine. HOA fees, $1,200 annually. Mine. The premium internet plan that Daniel uses for his work from home Fridays, $120 a month. Mine. The water softener that keeps all the fixtures from getting mineral buildup, $65 a month rental. Mine." "Should I continue?" "Emma," Daniel started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. The gym membership you both praised Daniel for maintaining so he could stay healthy and focused, $180 a month for both of us. My account. The wine subscription that Daniel serves to impress his colleagues when they visit, $240 a month. Mine. The premium cable package with all the sports channels, $240 a month. Mine." James was now studying the documents I'd laid out, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He'd always been the quieter parent, an accountant who'd retired 5 years ago and mostly let Patricia run the show. But he was methodical, detail-oriented, and I watched him add up numbers in his head, his expression growing more troubled with each calculation. "The groceries," I continued. "Every week for 5 years I've done the shopping. Organic produce because Daniel says it's better for his health. Premium cuts of meat because Patricia complains if the pot roast isn't tender enough. Specialty items for these Sunday dinners, roughly $800 to $1,000 a month, all from my personal account, which I funded with my freelance consulting income." "You're consulting," Patricia said weakly. "I thought that was just a hobby, something to keep you busy." "My hobby brings in approximately $12,000 a month," I said quietly. "I work with 6 major corporations, providing financial analysis and strategic planning. I work from home, yes, which apparently made you think I don't work at all. But I've been the primary breadwinner in this household for the past 3 years, ever since Daniel's company restructured and cut his salary by 30%. Daniel's head snapped up. "You said you wouldn't tell them about that." "You said we were keeping financial secrets to protect your pride," I corrected. "But we're not keeping secrets anymore, are we? We're having financial transparency, complete separate finances just like you wanted." Patricia looked at her son with something between pity and disappointment. "Your salary was cut?" "When?" 3 years ago," I answered for him. "He went from making $165,000 to $115,000. Still a good salary, don't misunderstand. But our mortgage is $4,800 a month. His half would be $2,400. Add in his half of the basic utilities, property taxes, homeowner's insurance, and Daniel's financial obligation to this household is approximately $3,000 a month. That leaves him with roughly $6,500 take-home after taxes and household expenses. I pulled out another document, Daniel's credit card statements that I'd printed from our shared online banking before he'd changed the password yesterday. These are Daniel's personal expenses from the past 3 months, average of $4,000 monthly. Restaurant meals, golf club membership, car payment on his BMW, the nice clothes he needs for work. So that leaves him with approximately $2,500 a month for everything else. Where are you going with this? Patricia asked, but I could see she was starting to understand. Under our old arrangement, where I quietly paid for everything beyond Daniel's basic contribution, he had money for all his wants. Under this new separate finances system, where he has to actually pay for half of everything we both use, he's going to be in debt within 2 months. James spoke for the first time. How much does Emma contribute monthly to the household? I pulled out my own carefully prepared spreadsheet. Between my personal account payments for services, utilities, groceries, household supplies, and maintenance, approximately $9,000 a month. Plus, I've been paying an extra $1,000 monthly toward the mortgage principal, which over 3 years has built up significant equity. Equity that, according to our prenuptial agreement that Patricia insisted we sign, remains solely in my name since it came from my separate property funds, the prenup. I'd almost forgotten about that detail until I'd reviewed it with my lawyer on Friday. Patricia had insisted 5 years ago that we needed to protect Daniel's assets. She'd hired the lawyer, dictated the terms, made sure that anything Daniel brought to the marriage stayed his if we divorced. What she hadn't considered was that I'd brought far more to the marriage than Daniel had, and the prenup she'd insisted on actually protected me, not her son. This is ridiculous, Patricia said again, but there was no strength behind it now. You're married. You're supposed to be a team. I thought so too, I said softly. Until your son told me I don't understand real struggle, until he said I'm privileged, until he announced we needed separate finances because I contribute nothing. Well, now he has what he asked for, complete financial independence. Daniel finally found his voice. Emma, I didn't mean all this. I just thought we should be more clear about expenses. And now we are. I gathered up the documents neatly. Crystal clear. Would you like to know what I've changed in the past 3 days? His silence was answer enough, but I continued anyway. I've canceled Maria, the landscaping service, the premium cable, the wine subscription, the gym membership, and the houseplant service that kept all these beautiful rooms green and vibrant. I've downgraded our internet to basic. I've canceled the grocery delivery service. I've stopped paying the extra $1,000 on the mortgage principal. I've suspended the home warranty. I paused, watching their faces. I've also moved all the kitchen appliances I personally purchased into storage. The espresso machine, $600. The stand mixer, $450. The food processor, $300. The Dutch oven set, $800. The knife block, $1,200. All mine, all purchased with my money, all no longer available for household use. Patricia was staring at the empty counter spaces with dawning horror. The kitchen is bare. The kitchen is fairly allocated, I corrected. Everything that was here before we moved in stays. Everything I added is mine. Same with the rest of the house. The bedroom furniture set, $8,000 mine. The living room sectional, $6,000 mine. The dining table where we're sitting, mine. But I'll leave it since we need somewhere to eat. This is insane, Daniel said, his voice rising. You can't just take everything. I'm not taking anything, I said calmly. I'm simply claiming what's mine under our new separate finances arrangement. You wanted independence, you have it. You're free to furnish the house however you like with your budget. James cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we should go. We're not going anywhere, she snapped. Not until this is resolved. Emma, you're being childish and vindictive. I'm being exactly as financial as Daniel requested. I stood up, gathering my documents. You wanted to see receipts? Here they are. You wanted to know who contributes what. Now you know. You thought I was privileged? Well, the privilege was actually Daniel's, having a wife who funded his lifestyle without recognition or appreciation. Mom, Daniel said desperately, maybe we should talk about this later. But Patricia wasn't done. You've made your point, Emma. Very dramatic, very thorough. But what do you want? An apology? You want us to praise you for doing what a wife should do? The audacity of that statement hung in the air. Even James looked shocked. What I want, I said quietly, is for Daniel to understand what I've contributed to this marriage. What I want is to never again hear that I don't understand real struggle or that I'm coasting through life on his success. What I want is basic respect and recognition for the partnership I thought we had. I moved toward the kitchen doorway, then turned back. But what I need is for both of you to leave. Now, Sunday lunches are canceled indefinitely. They cost too much, both financially and emotionally, and they're not in my separate budget. Patricia stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. You can't ban us from seeing our son. I'm not banning anyone from anything. Daniel is welcome to see you whenever he wants, wherever he wants, but not in my house, eating my food, judging my contributions while benefiting from everything I provide. That arrangement is over. Daniel, Patricia turned to her son, expecting him to defend her, to put me in my place, but Daniel just sat there staring at the documents spread across the table, at the itemized truth of our marriage laid bare in receipts and bank statements. I think, James said carefully, we should respect Emma's wishes and go home, Patricia. I will not, Patricia. James's voice was firm in a way I'd rarely heard. We're leaving. Now. He stood up, took his wife's arm gently but insistently, and guided her toward the front door. She sputtered protests the entire way, but James kept moving, kept guiding, kept quiet, except for a single sentence he said as they past me in the hallway. I'm sorry, Emma. We should have seen what you were doing for our son. Then they were gone, and I was left standing in my mostly empty house with my husband, who still hadn't moved from the kitchen table. You humiliated my mother, he finally said. Your mother humiliated herself, I replied, by assuming she understood our finances when she didn't, by pushing you to demand something that only hurt you, by calling me privileged when she had no idea what privilege actually looked like in this marriage. He looked up at me, and for the first time since this started, I saw something other than defensiveness in his eyes, something that might have been understanding, or shame, or both. I didn't know, he said quietly, about all of it. I mean, I knew you paid for some things, but I didn't realize it was so much. You didn't want to know, I said. It was easier to let me handle everything quietly while you played the provider to your parents. It was comfortable until your mother convinced you I was taking advantage of you. I'm sorry. 2 words. Simple, inadequate, but a start. Are you sorry for what you said, or sorry you got caught not knowing what your wife contributes to your life? He flinched at that. Both, I think. I sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through Patricia's scream and the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a hollow weariness. Daniel, I need you to understand something. This wasn't about proving I'm better than you or that I contribute more. This was about you seeing me as an equal partner instead of a dependent. Your mother's voice has been getting louder in your head for months, and you started believing her narrative instead of trusting what we built together. I know. Do you? I pushed the stack of documents toward him. Because these numbers, this is just money. What really hurts is that you thought I didn't understand real struggle. I grew up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs. I put myself through college with loans and scholarships. I built my consulting business from nothing while you were climbing the corporate ladder with your father's connections. I know struggle, Daniel. I just don't wear it like a badge the way your mother thinks I should. He picked up one of the renovation receipts, a payment to the contractor who gutted and rebuilt our master bathroom. $14,000 for a space he used every single day without ever thinking about where it came from. I was an idiot, he said. Yes, you were. Can we fix this? I don't know, I answered honestly. Can you stand up to your mother when she decides to have opinions about our marriage? Can you remember what I contribute when she's whispering in your ear that I'm not good enough? Can you actually see me as your equal instead of someone who needs to prove their worth? He set down the receipt and looked at me directly. I want to try. Wanting isn't enough, I said. Your mother screamed in my kitchen today because she discovered her son isn't the provider she thought he was. That's going to bother her. She's going to work on you, try to rewrite this narrative, convince you that somehow I manipulated the situation. I won't let her. You let her convince you we needed separate finances in the first place. He had no response to that because it was true. For all his education, his corporate success, his supposed independence, Daniel had always been susceptible to Patricia's influence. She'd shaped his views on marriage, on gender roles, on what a proper household should look like, and those views had nearly destroyed what we'd built together. The separate finances arrangement, I continued, it's going to continue until you prove you actually understand what partnership means. I'm not putting everything back the way it was just because you suddenly see the receipts. You wanted transparency? We'll have transparency. You'll pay for exactly half of everything from now on, and you'll feel what it's like to actually budget for the life you've been living. His face paled. Emma, I can't afford half of what we had. You saw my expenses. Then adjust them, I said simply. That's what financial independence means, Daniel. Make choices, prioritize, live within your means. But the house will fall apart without the landscaping service, without Maria. Then hire them yourself with your budget, or learn to mow the lawn and clean the bathrooms. Those are your options. He looked around the kitchen, at the empty spaces where appliances used to be, at the bare counters that used to hold decorative items and useful gadgets. This is really happening. This is really happening, I confirmed. You wanted separate finances. You have them, permanently, until you earn back my trust. How do I do that? I stood up, gathering my documents. Figure it out, Daniel. I'm done managing your relationship with your mother and your understanding of our marriage. That's your work now. I left him sitting at the table and went to my home office, the one room in the house that was entirely mine and always had been. My desk, my computer, my files, my space where I did the work that apparently didn't count as real work in Patricia's worldview. I had 3 client meetings scheduled for tomorrow, a financial analysis due by Wednesday, and a strategic planning session on Thursday that would bring in $15,000 if the contract went through. Real work, bringing in real money, supporting a real life that my mother-in-law had convinced her son I was too privileged to understand. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister, Lauren. Mom said Daniel's mom was screaming at your place. Neighbors called her to gossip. Are you okay? I smiled despite everything and typed back, I'm fine, just teaching some lessons about household budget and financial abuse. Long story. Can't wait to hear it. Coffee tomorrow? Definitely. Lauren was 3 years younger, worked as a nurse, and had always seen through Patricia's polished exterior to manipulative controller underneath. She'd warned me years ago that marrying into the Mitchell family meant dealing with a mother-in-law who would never think anyone was good enough for her precious son. I thought I could handle it. I'd thought that by being accommodating, by never making waves, by quietly supporting Daniel in his ambitions, I could win Patricia over eventually. Instead, I just taught her that I could be walked over, that my contributions could be dismissed, that I would accept being called privileged while funding the lifestyle she bragged about. That ended today. My computer dinged with an email notification. One of my clients requesting an additional analysis that wasn't in our original contract. I quoted them $8,000 for the extra work. Professional rate, non-negotiable. They accepted within 10 minutes. Another $8,000 in my separate budget. Another chunk chunk of money that Daniel had no claim to, that Patricia would never know about, that proved my work had value far beyond what either of them had recognized. I heard Daniel moving around downstairs, probably trying to figure out what to do with a kitchen that had almost no appliances, and a lunch that consisted of sandwiches he hadn't even made himself. Let him figure it out. I had work to do. By evening, the house had settled into an uncomfortable quiet. Daniel had ordered takeout for himself, hadn't asked if I wanted anything, probably because he was starting to realize that shared meals meant shared costs, and he was trying to minimize expenses. I'd eaten the sandwich I'd made earlier and was content. Around 8, my phone rang. Patricia. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately, then a third time. Finally, a text. We need to talk about today. This is ridiculous behavior, Emma. I blocked her number. 30 seconds later, Daniel appeared in my office doorway. Mom wants to talk to you. I'm sure she does. Emma, she's really upset. So am I said, not looking up from my computer. The difference is that my upset is justified. Hers is just injured pride because her fantasy about her son's perfect provider status got shattered. She says she didn't realize how much you contributed. She wants to apologize. Now I did look up. Does she want to apologize? Or does she want to smooth things over so she can go back to her Sunday lunches and bragging rights about this beautiful house that her son supposedly provided? He shifted uncomfortably. Maybe both. Then she can send a written apology, detailed and specific, acknowledging exactly what she said that was wrong and exactly how she'll behave differently going forward. Until then, I don't want to hear from her. Emma, she's my mother, and I'm your wife. The one you told didn't understand real struggle. The one you accused of being privileged. The one whose contributions you dismissed until I forced you to look at the receipts. Your mother influenced those beliefs, Daniel. She's not owed my forgiveness just because she birthed you. He stood there for another moment, clearly wanting to push the issue, but something in my expression must have warned him off. He retreated, and I returned to my work. The next morning, Monday, I woke up early and went for a run. When I got back, Daniel was in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, the basic 4-cup model that had been there when we moved in. His beloved espresso machine was in storage with my other appliances. There's instant coffee in the pantry, I offered as I passed through to shower. I hate instant coffee. Then buy an espresso machine for your separate budget. In the shower, I let the hot water wash away the lingering tension from yesterday's confrontation. I'd done the right thing. I knew that rationally, but emotionally, it was draining. 5 years of partnership, or what I thought was partnership, revealed to be something much more uneven. 5 years of my contributions being invisible until I forced them into visibility. The question now was whether Daniel could actually change, or whether this was just temporary discomfort until he found a way to return to the old dynamic. When I came downstairs dressed for my day, Daniel was still in the kitchen, now attempting to make breakfast with the limited supplies available. No fancy organic eggs, no artisanal bread, no specialty butter, just regular grocery store items that I'd bought for myself. I'm meeting a client at 9, I said, grabbing my laptop bag. I'll be back around noon. Can we talk tonight? He asked. Really talk? Maybe, I said, if you have something meaningful to say. The client meeting went well. Marcus Hendricks, CFO of a mid-sized tech company, needed help restructuring their financial reporting systems. We'd worked together before, and he trusted my judgment. You look different today, he commented as we wrapped up. More intense, maybe? Just focused, I said, clear about my priorities. Well, whatever it is, it's working. This analysis is exactly what we needed. I'm authorizing the full contract, all 6 months. $72,000 over 6 months. My biggest contract yet. I thanked him professionally, but inside I was glowing. This was real work. This was real contribution. This was proof that my value existed completely independent of my marriage, my husband, or my mother-in-law's opinion. When I got home, I found Daniel in the living room, laptop open, apparently working from home for the day. He looked up when I entered. How was your meeting? Productive. I just landed a $72,000 contract. His eyes widened. That's amazing. It's my job, I said simply. The job your mother thought was a hobby. The job that's been funding your comfortable lifestyle while she convinced you I was coasting. He closed his laptop. Can we talk now, please? I set down my bag and sat in the chair across from him, not on the couch beside him. Distance felt important right now. I've been thinking, he started, about everything you showed us yesterday. About the money, yes, but more about what it represents. You've been carrying this household financially, and I've been taking credit for it. Not just taking credit, I corrected, believing you deserved credit. There's a difference. If you'd known what I was doing and chosen to let people think otherwise, that would be one thing. But you genuinely believed your salary was providing our lifestyle. I know, and that's worse, isn't it? That I was so clueless about my own household budget. It's not great, I admitted. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I called in sick to work today. I needed time to think, to really look at our finances without the panic of yesterday. Emma, I went through 5 years of bank statements, 5 years of seeing your transfers, your payments, your contributions, and I never questioned where the money was going. I just assumed it was all from my salary somehow. You assumed because it was easier than asking, I said. Easier than recognizing that your wife was the primary breadwinner. Easier than admitting to your mother that her vision of you as the successful provider wasn't entirely accurate. You're right. He rubbed his face tiredly. And the worst part is, I think on some level I knew. I knew you made good money. I knew you paid for things. I just never added it up because adding it up would mean admitting I wasn't the man my parents raised me to be. This was the most self-awareness I'd heard from Daniel in years, maybe ever. What man is that? The breadwinner, the provider, the successful son who takes care of everything and everyone. That's what Dad did. That's what Grandpa did. That's what Mitchell men do, according to my mother. He looked at me directly. But it's not what I did. You did it. And instead of being grateful or proud or even just honest about it, I let my mom convince me you were somehow less than me. Financial abuse, I said quietly. That's what my sister called it when I told her what happened. When one partner controls the narrative about money to diminish the other's contributions, that's financial abuse. He flinched. I never thought of it that way. Most people don't. But calling me privileged when I was paying for your privilege? Demanding separate finances to punish me for supposedly contributing nothing when I was contributing everything? That's abuse, Daniel. Subtle, maybe not intentional, but still damaging. I'm sorry, he said again. I know I said it yesterday, but I mean it more now. I'm sorry for not seeing you. I'm sorry for not defending you. I'm sorry for letting my mother's voice become louder than my own judgment. Apologies are good, I said, but they're just words. What matters is what you do next. I want to make this right. Then start by telling your mother the truth. All of it. Not in anger, not in defense of me, but because she needs to understand that her worldview about gender roles and marriage and success is outdated and harmful. He nodded slowly. She won't take it well. Probably not, but that's not your problem to fix. Her feelings about reality don't get to dictate our reality anymore. What about us? He asked. Can we fix us? I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to fall back into the comfort of partnership, wanted to believe this moment of clarity would last. But I'd learned something important over the past few days. Comfort without respect wasn't actually comfortable at all. I said slowly, we can try. But the separate finances stay for now. You need to actually experience what it costs to maintain the life you've been living. You need to make choices about what's important and what's not. You need to understand budgeting and priorities and sacrifice. How long? Until I trust that you see me as an equal, not as someone who needs to prove their worth. Until I trust that you'll stand up to your mother when she starts her commentary again. Until I trust that this isn't just temporary discomfort that you'll forget about once things get easier. He looked around the room, at the furniture that was mine, at the empty spaces where decorations used to be, at the stark reality of what separate finances actually meant for him. This is going to be hard, he said. Yes, I agreed. But maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe easy was the problem all along. The next 2 weeks were a revelation in household dynamics and the true cost of comfort. Daniel learned to grocery shop, which resulted in 3 trips the first week because he kept forgetting essential items. He learned that the organic produce he insisted tasted better cost almost double what regular produce cost. He learned that the premium cuts of meat he preferred for his meal prep added up quickly. He also learned to clean, though learned might be generous. The first bathroom cleaning took him 45 minutes and left streaks on the mirror. The vacuuming was sporadic at best. By day 10, he broke down and called Maria back, offering to pay her full rate out of his separate budget. I can't do this, he admitted to me after Maria's first visit back. I can't work full-time and keep this house the way it needs to be kept. Now you understand what I was managing, I said, while also working full-time, while also handling all the household expenses you didn't think about, while also preparing those Sunday lunches your mother enjoyed so much. He sat down heavily on the couch, my couch technically, though I'd stopped pointing out ownership of every item. I had no idea how much invisible work you were doing. Most people don't until they have to do it themselves. The lawn situation became critical by week 2. Daniel had attempted to mow it himself, realized our garage didn't actually contain a working mower. Mine had broken last year and I'd been relying on the landscaping service and had to either rent equipment or hire someone. He chose to hire someone, though he went with the cheapest service he could find, which resulted in an uneven cut that made Patricia comment acidly when she drove by. She'd been driving by frequently, I'd noticed, not stopping, not calling, since I'd blocked her number and Daniel had apparently asked her to give us space, but definitely cruising past to check on things. The overgrown lawn before Daniel hired the discount service must have mortified her. Your mother's been surveilling us, I mentioned to Daniel one evening. I know. Dad told me. He said she's worried about how this looks to the neighbors. Of course that's what she's worried about. Not how her son is doing, not whether our marriage will survive, but what the neighbors think about the lawn. Daniel actually smiled at that. A tired smile, but genuine. Dad says she's been insufferable at home. Keeps ranting about how young people today don't understand real marriage, how in her day wives knew their place, how I'm letting you walk all over me. And what do you say to that? I told her she has no idea what she's talking about. I told her that Mom's Day created a lot of divorced and unhappy people who stayed together because they didn't have better options. I told her that I'd rather have an equal partner than a subordinate wife. I set down the book I'd been reading. You said that to Patricia? I did. She hung up on me. Dad called back an hour later to say well done. James said that. He said it was about time someone stood up to her. He said he spent 40 years letting her run the show, and it made him a passenger in his own life. Daniel paused. He also said he's proud of you for not backing down. Said you've got more spine than he did at your age. That was unexpected. James had always seemed content to let Patricia lead, to avoid conflict, to maintain peace at any cost. But maybe that's what it looked like from the outside. Maybe inside. He'd been as trapped as I'd felt these past few months. How do you feel about all this? I asked Daniel. Exhausted, he admitted. Stressed about money in a way I've never been before. Overwhelmed by all the details of running a household that I never had to think about. But also, he paused, searching for words. Also more aware, more present, more appreciative of what you do. That's the point of separate finances. Not to punish you, but to educate you. Mission accomplished, he said dryly. I'm educated. Can we please hire back the landscaping service and split it? The discount guy scalped half the front lawn. We can discuss shared services, I allowed, but you need to feel the real cost for a full month first. That was our agreement. He groaned, but didn't argue. He was learning that lesson too. Partnership meant compromise, but it also meant accountability. My work continued to flourish. The contract with Marcus's company was going well, and 2 other potential clients had reached out based on referrals. My consulting business was expanding faster than ever, partly because I was putting more energy into it now that I wasn't managing household drama. Lauren came over one evening, bringing Thai food and wine. We sat in my mostly empty living room, the space looking larger without all the furniture and decorations I'd removed. "This is deeply weird," she said, gesturing at the bare walls. "It's like a model home before they stage it. It's what happens when you remove years of unacknowledged contributions," I said. "How's Daniel handling it?" "He's learning. Slowly, but he's learning. He actually stood up to Patricia last week." Lauren nearly dropped her spring roll. "Daniel stood up to Patricia? Our Daniel? The one who used to ask his mother's permission to go out with friends even after you got married?" "The same one. He told her that her views on marriage were outdated and that he'd rather have an equal partner than a subordinate wife." "Holy shit, Emma, that's huge. That's character development right there." I smiled despite myself. "It is, isn't it? So are you going to forgive him? Put things back the way they were?" "Not exactly the way they were," I said carefully. "That system was broken, but maybe we can build something new, something more honest. Do you think he can maintain it? The spine growth, I mean. Or will he backslide once Patricia starts working on him again?" It was the question I'd been asking myself. "I don't know. That's why the separate finances continue. I need to see consistency, not just panic-driven change." "Fair," Lauren agreed. "You know what I love about this whole situation, though? You didn't just get mad. You got methodical. You documented everything, created a strategy, and executed it perfectly. Very you. Years of financial consulting had to be good for something." Speaking of which, Lauren pulled out her phone. "I need your advice. My hospital's retirement plan options are confusing as hell, and I don't trust the financial advisor they assigned me. He keeps pushing products that benefit him more than me." We spent the next hour going through her retirement options, and I felt that familiar satisfaction of helping someone navigate financial complexity. This was what I was good at. This was my real work, not the invisible household management that Patricia had dismissed as easy living. Around 9, Lauren left, and I found Daniel in the kitchen attempting to cook dinner. Attempting being the key word. "What are you making?" I asked, surveying the chaos of pans and ingredients. "Trying to make chicken marsala. It's not going well. The chicken was burned on one side and raw on the other. The sauce had curdled. The pasta was overcooked into mush." "When did you start cooking?" "About an hour ago. I watched 3 YouTube videos." Apparently watching and doing are very different things. I couldn't help but laugh at his defeated expression. "Here, let me show you the basic technique." I pulled out a fresh chicken breast from the fridge, my fridge that I'd restocked with my grocery budget. "The heat needs to be medium, not high. You need to let it cook evenly on each side before flipping." We cooked together, something we hadn't done in years, maybe ever. I showed him how to deglaze the pan, how to reduce the sauce, how to time pasta so it finished perfectly al dente. It was domestic and ordinary, and somehow felt more intimate than the dinners we used to have where I prepared everything alone while he watched TV. "This is actually nice," he said as we sat down to eat the successful second attempt. "Cooking together, I mean. It's partnership," I said. "Real partnership, where both people contribute and both people know what it takes." "I want more of this," he said. "Not just cooking, but all of it. Actually working together instead of me just benefiting from your work without seeing it." "Then keep showing up," I told him. "Keep learning, keep trying, keep standing up to your mother when she tries to resurrect the old dynamic." "About Mom," he said carefully. "She wants to come over. She's written the apology you requested, detailed and specific. Dad says she's been working on it for days. Multiple drafts. Email it to me," I said. "I'll read it and decide if I'm ready for a conversation." The apology arrived the next morning. 3 pages, single-spaced, meticulously detailed. Patricia acknowledged every dismissive comment, every assumption about my contributions, every time she pushed Daniel to demand more, while failing to recognize what I was already providing. She acknowledged that her views on marriage roles were based on her own experiences and weren't universal truths. She acknowledged that she'd caused real harm to our relationship and to my sense of worth. It was thorough, specific, and honestly better than I'd expected from someone as prideful as Patricia Mitchell. But words were still just words. "Tell your mother she can visit," I told Daniel that evening. "Saturday afternoon, 2 hours maximum. Ground rules. No comments about the house's appearance. No comments about finances. No advice about our marriage. She's coming as a guest who's on probation, not as the matriarch passing judgment." Saturday came, and I was more nervous than I wanted to admit. I'd faced down Patricia before, but this was different. This was setting the terms for our relationship going forward, establishing boundaries that had never existed before. She arrived exactly on time, James beside her. She looked smaller somehow, less commanding than usual. She was wearing a simple dress instead of her usual designer armor, minimal jewelry, minimal makeup. It was the most understated I'd ever seen her. "Emma," she said as I opened the door. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Patricia, James, come in." We settled in the living room, the sparse living room that made our changed circumstances undeniable. Patricia's eyes swept over the empty spaces, but true to the ground rules, she said nothing about them. "I read your apology," I said without preamble. "It was thorough. I meant every word," she said, and her voice sounded genuine. "I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking about nothing else, about how wrong I was, how much damage I caused, how I nearly destroyed my son's marriage because I couldn't see past my own limited worldview." James spoke up. "I've been talking to Patricia about the financial realities of your household, about what you've contributed, what you've built, what you've carried. I'm ashamed that we didn't see it sooner." "You didn't see it because I didn't make it visible," I said. "I thought being quietly competent was enough. I thought my contributions would be appreciated eventually without having to demand recognition. I was wrong about that. You shouldn't shouldn't have had to demand recognition, Patricia said. That should have been given freely, with gratitude. I treated you like you were lucky to be married to my son, when the truth is he's lucky to be married to you. The admission hung in the air, revolutionary in its honesty. Why? I asked. Why did you treat me that way? I've never understood what I did to earn your dismissal. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. You didn't do anything. That was the problem. You made it look easy, being accomplished, being successful, balancing work and home. You made it look like you didn't struggle, and that threatened me. Threatened you how? Because I struggled, she admitted. I gave up my career when I had Daniel. I poured everything into being a perfect housewife, a perfect mother, a perfect hostess. It was hard, exhausting, often thankless. But I told myself it was noble, that I was sacrificing for my family in a way modern women didn't understand. She looked at me directly. Then you came along. Successful career, beautiful home, seemingly effortless at all of it. And you made my sacrifice look unnecessary. Like maybe I'd given up my dreams for nothing when I could have had both. That was painful to face. So instead I decided you must be doing something wrong, taking some shortcut, not really struggling like real women struggle. The honesty was startling. I'd expected defensiveness, justifications, maybe partial acknowledgement. Not this raw admission of insecurity and misdirected resentment. I wasn't taking shortcuts, I said quietly. I was drowning sometimes, trying to keep everything balanced, trying to prove I could do it all. I just didn't show it because I thought showing struggle would be used against me. And I would have used it against you, Patricia admitted. That's what makes this so awful. I was looking for reasons to diminish you because your success reminded me of what I'd given up. James reached over and took his wife's hand. Patricia's been doing a lot of difficult thinking about her choices, about how she influenced Daniel, about the kind of mother-in-law she's been. I don't expect forgiveness, Patricia said. I don't think I deserve it, honestly, but I want you to know that I see clearly now. I see what you've done for Daniel, for your household, for your career. I see the strength it took to stand up to me and to demand the respect you should have always had, and I'm genuinely sorry for being so blind for so long. I looked at this woman who had made the past 5 years so much harder than they needed to be, who had undermined my marriage and my sense of worth, who had convinced her son that I was somehow less than I was, and I saw, maybe for the first time, not the intimidating matriarch, but a complex person wrestling with her own regrets and fears. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully, and I appreciate the self-reflection, but apologies are just the beginning. What matters is how you behave going forward. I understand, Patricia said. I'll respect whatever boundaries you need. I'll keep my opinions about your marriage to myself. I'll acknowledge your contributions instead of dismissing them. I'll be a better mother-in-law if you'll give me the chance. And if you slip, I asked, if your old patterns resurface, then you call me on it immediately, she said. Don't let it build up. Don't protect my feelings. Just tell me directly when I'm being inappropriate, and I'll work to do better. It was more than I'd expected, more accountability than Patricia had ever demonstrated before. It wasn't enough to erase 5 years of damage, but it was a foundation to build on. Okay, I said, we can try. Slowly, with clear boundaries, with accountability. But Patricia, if you undermine me to Daniel again, if you push him to devalue my contributions, if you slip back into your old patterns, this opportunity is over, permanently. I understand, she said, and I'll do better, I promise. We talked for another hour, carefully, with more honesty than we'd ever shared before. Patricia asked about my work, genuinely interested, actually listening to my answers. James talked about his own regrets about letting Patricia control their household dynamics for so long, about conversations they'd been having about equality and partnership in their own marriage. When they left, I felt cautiously optimistic. Cautious because trust takes time to rebuild, because patterns of behavior don't change overnight, because words are easier than actions. But optimistic because for the first time, Patricia seemed to actually see me as a person rather than as competition for her son's resources, or a reflection of her own choices. How did it go? Daniel asked when I came back inside. Better than expected, I admitted. Your mother did a lot of self-reflection, some real work on understanding why she treated me the way she did. Dad's been pushing her, Daniel said. He told her that if she didn't genuinely apologize and change her behavior, he was going to start spending more time here without her, that our home was more peaceful than theirs, and he was tired of the drama. James said that? James is apparently done being a passive participant in his own life. Mom's wake-up call wasn't just about you and me. It was about their marriage, too. We sat together on the couch, not quite touching, but closer than we'd been in weeks. 1 month down, I said, 2 more months of separate finances to go. I know, he sighed, and I know why. I need to really feel this, really understand what partnership costs, really appreciate what you've been doing. Do you? I asked. Appreciate it, I mean. He turned to look at me directly. Emma, I'm exhausted all the time now. I'm stressed about money constantly. I'm overwhelmed by all the invisible work of maintaining a household. And I'm finally understanding what you've been carrying for years while I took credit for the results. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it. I'm not the same person I was a month ago, he continued. I can't be. I've seen too much, learned too much, felt too much of the weight you were carrying alone. And I don't want to go back to who I was. I want to be better. I want to be your actual partner, not your dependent who thought he was the provider. That's what I needed to hear, I said softly. Not just an apology for what happened, but a commitment to being different going forward. Can I ask you something? He said hesitantly. Of course. When the 3 months are up, when we're done with separate finances, what happens then? Do we go back to shared everything, or do we need a new system? It was a good question, one I'd been thinking about myself. I think we need a hybrid, I said slowly. Shared household account where we both contribute proportionally based on income, but separate personal accounts for our own expenses, our own choices, our own independence. That way, we're partners in maintaining our home and life together, but we're also individuals with our own financial autonomy. That sounds healthy, he agreed, and terrifying for my budget. You'll adjust, I said. You'll learn to prioritize, to budget, to make choices about what really matters. That's part of being an adult and a partner. I'm learning that, he said wryly. The hard way, but I'm learning. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, holding hands, closer to real partnership than we'd been in years. Emma, Daniel said quietly. Yes, thank you for not giving up on us, for making me see what I was too blind to notice, for demanding better instead of just accepting things as they were. Thank you for being willing to change, I replied, for standing up to your mother, for doing the hard work of becoming a better partner. I love you, he said. I don't think I've said that enough lately, not in a way that really meant recognizing who you are and what you do. I love you too, I said, the you that's emerging from this process, the partner you're becoming. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We still had work to do, boundaries to maintain, patterns to break, but it was a beginning, a real one this time, built on honesty and respect and genuine partnership instead of unexamined assumptions and invisible labor. And sometimes that's more valuable than any happily ever after. The remaining 2 months of our separate finances experiment transformed our household in ways I hadn't anticipated. Daniel became obsessed with budgeting, tracking every expense in detailed spreadsheets that would have impressed my consulting clients. He'd sit at the kitchen table in the evenings, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how to afford both the gym membership and the decent haircut his job required. I don't understand how you made this work, he said one evening in week 6. Even with your income, the math barely adds up when you're paying for everything I thought was just magically happening. I prioritize differently than you do, I explained. I didn't have a luxury car payment. I didn't play golf at an expensive club. I didn't buy a new phone every year. I chose household comfort over personal status symbols. He looked at his BMW lease statement due for renewal in 2 months. I'm thinking of downgrading, maybe buying a used Honda instead of leasing new. That's a very adult decision, I said, genuinely impressed. It's a practical decision. If we're going to build a real partnership, I can't be throwing away money on a car that's just for show. He paused. Mom's going to have opinions about that. Let her have opinions. They don't get to dictate your choices anymore. True to prediction, when Daniel told Patricia he was buying a used Honda instead of leasing another BMW, she called it lowering your standards. But Daniel, to his credit, stood firm. Mom, I've been living beyond my means while my wife subsidized my lifestyle. That's embarrassing, not something to double down on. The Honda is safer, more reliable, and costs a quarter of what I was paying. It's the smart choice. I wasn't present for that conversation, but Daniel recounted it with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Standing up to Patricia was getting easier, but it still took effort. Dad said he's proud of me, Daniel added. Said he wishes he'd made similar choices when he was my age instead of always trying to impress people who didn't actually care about him. James had become an unexpected ally in our household transformation. He started visiting alone sometimes, without Patricia, ostensibly to help Daniel with home maintenance projects, but really to talk about marriage and partnership and the mistakes he'd made in his own life. I let your mother-in-law run everything for 40 years, James told us both one Saturday while helping Daniel fix a leaking faucet. Every financial decision, every social commitment, every aspect of our life together. I told myself I was being a good husband by letting her have control, but really I was just being a coward, too scared to have an opinion, too comfortable to rock the boat. You're having opinions now, though, I noted. He'd recently told Patricia they were selling their oversized house and downsizing to a condo, a decision she'd fought until she realized he was serious. Better late than never, James said. Watching you two work through this crisis made me realize I was running out of time to have an equal partnership with my own wife. Patricia and I are in therapy now, working through 40 years of unhealthy patterns. It's not easy, but it's necessary. The revelation that Patricia and James were in couples therapy was almost as shocking as everything else that had happened, but it explained some of the changes I'd noticed in Patricia. The softer edges, the willingness to listen, the actual curiosity about my work. By month 2 of separate finances, Daniel had learned to grocery shop efficiently, meal prep for the week, and even do basic household repairs. He'd called the discount landscaper back after their terrible first attempt and negotiated better service for the same low price, something the old Daniel never would have thought to do. I'm good at negotiating at work, he explained. I just never thought to apply those skills to personal life. Everything at home just magically happened, so I never had to think strategically about household management. That's the invisible labor, I said. The thinking, planning, organizing, negotiating that happens behind the scenes so life runs smoothly. It's real work, even if it doesn't look like office work. I'm never calling what you do a hobby again, he said seriously. Between your consulting and managing this household, you were working 2 full-time jobs. I was working one and taking credit for both. My consulting business continued to thrive. Word of mouth from satisfied clients brought in more opportunities, and I was now earning consistently over $15,000 a month. I hired an assistant, another expense from my separate budget, to help manage the growing workload. You're building an empire, Lauren observed during one of our weekly dinners, while simultaneously rebuilding your marriage. How do you do it all? I stopped trying to do it invisibly, I said. I stopped protecting other people from the reality of what it takes to maintain a comfortable life. And honestly, it's easier now that I'm not carrying everything alone. By month 3, Daniel was a different person in fundamental ways. He cooked dinner 3 nights a week without being asked. He did his own laundry and had learned that fabric softener was optional, but stain remover was essential. He'd taken over managing the lawn service and the pest control control and the trash pickup. Experiences that gave him new appreciation for the coordination required to keep a household running. "I finally understand what you meant about mental load," he said one evening. "It's not just doing the tasks, it's remembering the tasks exist, scheduling them, following up when they don't happen, keeping track of what needs to be done next. It's exhausting." "Welcome to the reality most women live with constantly," I said. "How did you manage all this, plus your actual job, plus my mother's constant judgment?" "Barely," I admitted. "I was approaching burnout when you demanded separate finances. In a weird way, your mother did me a favor by pushing you to that breaking point. It forced a crisis that needed to happen." Sunday lunches with Patricia and James resumed in month 3, but on dramatically different terms. We rotated hosting duties, Patricia's house one week, ours the next, a restaurant the third week. When we hosted, Daniel and I cooked together, and Patricia actually complimented the meal without comparing it to some restaurant or family memory. "This is lovely," she said simply. "Thank you both for having us." James gave her an approving nod, and I realized they'd probably practiced that response. The therapy was working. "How are the finances discussions going?" Patricia asked carefully. "Daniel mentioned you're approaching the end of your separate budgets trial." It was the first time she'd referenced our financial situation since the disastrous confrontation 3 months ago, and I could see the effort it took her to ask respectfully instead of demandingly. "We're negotiating a new system," I said, "something that honors both partnership and individual autonomy." "That sounds healthy," Patricia said. "Much healthier than what James and I had, where I controlled everything and he pretended not to care." James smiled wryly. "Our therapist calls it financial enmeshment. Apparently it's common, but problematic. We're working on separating our identities from our bank accounts." "It's strange," Patricia admitted. "Having my own money, making my own choices without having to explain or justify. I always thought that's what I wanted, but I'd structured our finances so that I controlled everything, which meant James had no real autonomy and neither did I. Because I was so busy managing his life, I had no energy for my own." It was the most self-aware I'd ever heard Patricia sound. Therapy was definitely working. The 3-month mark arrived on a Wednesday. Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table that evening, the table I'd bought but had stopped claiming ownership of, with our laptops open and our financial records spread between us. "So," Daniel said, "here's what I've learned. I cannot afford half of our previous lifestyle on my salary. Not even close. The house is too expensive, the services are too numerous, the expectations are too high." "Agreed," I said, "which is why we're not going back to that system. I've been thinking about this a lot," he continued. "What if we contribute to shared expenses proportionally based on income? You make roughly 60% of our combined income now. I make 40%. What if household expenses came from a joint account that we fund at those same percentages?" "I'm listening. We'd both keep separate personal accounts for our own stuff, our own choices, our own independence. But the household stuff, mortgage, utilities, food, services, that comes from the joint account we both fund, fairly based on what we actually earn." It was almost exactly what I'd been thinking, but I let him explain his reasoning fully. "That way," he said, "we're both contributing meaningfully to our life together, but in proportion to our actual resources. It's fair without being blindly equal, because equal isn't actually fair when incomes are different." "I agree," I said, "with one addition. We need transparency, full access to each other's accounts, not to control, but to understand. No more invisible labor, no more hidden contributions, no more assumptions about who's doing what." "Transparency," he repeated. "Complete honesty about money, about work, about what it takes to keep our lives running smoothly." "Exactly." We spent the next 2 hours setting up the system. Joint household account, individual personal accounts, proportional contributions, full transparency. We listed every expense, categorized them as household or personal, and built a budget that reflected our actual lives instead of our assumptions about them. "This is going to work," Daniel said as we finalized the details. "This is what partnership actually looks like." "It is," I agreed. "But Daniel, there's one more thing we need to address." "What's that?" "Your mother. We've made progress, yes, but there's no guarantee she won't slip back into old patterns. We need to be united in maintaining boundaries, in shutting down inappropriate commentary, in protecting our partnership from external interference." "I know," he said, "and I'm ready for that. I've been practicing with my therapist." "You're in therapy?" He looked almost embarrassed. "Started about a month ago. Individual therapy, working on why I was so susceptible to mom's influence, why I didn't see your contributions, why I let external validation matter more than internal integrity. It's helping." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm proud of you for doing the work, for changing, for becoming the partner I needed you to be. I'm proud of us," he corrected, "for surviving this, for being honest even when it was hard, for building something better instead of just repairing what was broken." That weekend, we invited both sets of parents to dinner to announce our new financial system. My mother, Diane, flew in from Portland, where she'd retired after years of working multiple jobs to support Lauren and me. She'd been following the whole saga with a mixture of concern and approval. "I'm glad you stood up for yourself," she'd told me weeks ago. "I raised you to be strong, not to be convenient for a man and his demanding mother." Now she sat at our table, next to Lauren, across from Patricia and James, watching as Daniel and I presented our new approach to marriage finances. "We've spent 3 months learning what partnership actually means," I began. "Not assumptions, not invisible labor, but honest collaboration where both people see and value what the other contributes," Daniel continued. "We're implementing a proportional contribution system for household expenses while maintaining individual financial autonomy. It's fair, transparent, and sustainable." Patricia was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's much more evolved than what James and I ever managed. I think think it's brilliant. James nodded agreement. We're actually considering a similar system ourselves. Better late than never. My mother smiled. Emma, I'm so glad you demanded better instead of just accepting what you were given. You've always been strong, but this took a special kind of courage. I learned from you, I said. Watching you work 3 jobs, manage a household, raise 2 daughters alone, you showed me what real strength looks like. And you showed me, Daniel added quietly, what real partnership requires. The willingness to fight for equality, the courage to demand respect, the patience to let me learn instead of just taking over when I was struggling. Lauren raised her wine glass. To Emma and Daniel, to hard conversations, financial transparency, and Patricia's character development. To growth, James added, no matter how late it comes. To partnership, Patricia said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. Real partnership, not the performance I mistook for it. We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle inside me. Not perfect resolution, because real life doesn't work that way, but something better. Genuine progress, earned respect, and the foundation for something sustainable. After dinner, as people were leaving, Patricia pulled me aside. Emma, she said quietly, I know I've apologized, but I want you to understand something. What you did, standing up to me, forcing your husband to see reality, refusing to accept being diminished, that wasn't just about your marriage. You changed our family's dynamic. You changed how James sees our relationship. You changed how I see myself. That wasn't my goal, I said honestly. I know. That's what makes it more powerful. You weren't trying to change us. You were just demanding the respect you deserved. But in doing so, you held up a mirror to all of us. And what I saw reflected wasn't pretty. So thank you for having the courage to break patterns I didn't even know we were trapped in. She hugged me then, properly, and I hugged her back. Not forgiveness exactly, because some wounds take longer than 3 months to heal, but acceptance, acknowledgement, and the beginning of something that might eventually become mutual respect. After everyone left, Daniel and I cleaned the kitchen together. A routine we'd developed over these transformative months. Washing, drying, putting away, moving in comfortable synchronization. 3 months ago, I said, I couldn't have imagined we'd end up here. 3 months ago, Daniel replied, I was an idiot who thought he understood his own life when he didn't understand anything. You weren't an idiot. You were just ignorant in the literal sense, not knowing what you didn't know. Well, I know now. I know what it costs to run a household. I know what you contribute. I know what real partnership looks like. He paused, dish towel in hand, and I know how close I came to losing you because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. But you learned, I said. That's what matters. Not that you were perfect, but that you were willing to change. We finished the dishes and stood together in our kitchen, the kitchen that had been the site of Patricia's infamous scream and the beginning of our transformation. It looked fuller now, not because I'd moved my appliances back, though I had, but because it felt like shared space instead of my burden. Emma, Daniel said, yes, I love you. Not the version of you I thought existed, the convenient wife who made my life easy, but the real you, the strong, successful, take-no-prisoners woman who demanded I become worthy of being your partner. I love you too, I said. The you that emerged when you stopped performing for your mother and started showing up for us. We kissed then, and it felt different than it had in years. Not the comfortable kiss of routine, but the meaningful kiss of 2 people who'd fought their way to something real and chosen to stay. The journey wasn't over. Patterns of behavior don't disappear just because you recognize them. Patricia would slip sometimes. Daniel would revert to old habits occasionally, and I would have to continue advocating for myself instead of hoping acknowledgement would appear magically. But we had tools now. Communication, transparency, boundaries, respect. We had a system that honored both partnership and individuality. We had family members who were finally seeing us clearly instead of through the lens of their own projections. And most importantly, we had each other, not as provider and dependent, not as successful son and convenient wife, but as genuine partners building a life that worked for both of us. 3 months ago, Patricia's scream in my kitchen had marked a breaking point. Now, standing in that same kitchen with Daniel beside me as an actual partner, I realized it had also been a beginning. The painful, necessary, transformative beginning of something much better than what we'd had before. 6 months after Patricia's infamous scream, our lives had settled into a new rhythm that felt both strange and right. The proportional contribution system was working beautifully. Our joint household account covered mortgage, utilities, groceries, and services, funded 60-40 based on our incomes. Our separate personal accounts gave us each autonomy over our own choices without justification or explanation required. Daniel's used Honda Civic sat in the driveway next to my paid-off sedan. He'd been right about his mother's reaction to the downgrade. She'd called it embarrassing, until James had quietly asked her why a reliable car was less valuable than an expensive one that required Daniel to work overtime just to make lease payments. It's about image, Patricia had protested. Whose image? James had asked. Daniel's or yours? She hadn't had an answer for that. My consulting business had grown to the point where I needed to make a decision about its future. I was turning away clients regularly, working 60-hour weeks to keep up with demand, and missing the balance I'd finally achieved in my personal life. You need to hire people, Lauren said during one of our weekly dinners. Build an actual firm instead of being a one-woman operation. That's a huge step, I said. More overhead, more responsibility, more risk, more reward too. Emma, you're already doing the work of 3 consultants. Might as well get paid like 3 consultants and have a life outside work. She had a point. I'd been treating my business like a side hustle that had accidentally grown too large, when really it was a successful company that deserved proper infrastructure. That evening, I talked it through with Daniel. What if I incorporated properly? I asked. Hired 2 junior consultants, brought on on an operations manager, actually built something sustainable instead of just grinding myself into burnout? That sounds amazing, he said without hesitation. What's holding you back? Fear of failure, I suppose. Fear of overhead eating into profits. Fear of managing employees. Fear that I'm not ready to be a real business owner instead of just a freelancer. Daniel set down his book and looked at me seriously. Emma, you've been running our household like a CFO for years without recognition. You managed a crisis that forced me and my mother to completely restructure our worldviews. You've grown your consulting business by 400% in 6 months. I think you're more than ready to take this step. You really think so? I know so. And more than that, I want to support you the way you've supported me. If you need to take time to set up the business properly, take it. If you need to invest in hiring before the revenue catches up, invest. I'll cover more of our household expenses temporarily. That's what partners do. The offer touched me deeply. 6 months ago, Daniel hadn't understood the concept of supporting a partner's professional growth. Now he was volunteering to shoulder more financial responsibility so I could build something bigger. Thank you, I said. That means everything. Over the next 2 months, I incorporated Chen Financial Consulting as a proper LLC, hired 2 talented junior consultants fresh out of graduate programs, and brought on Sarah, a operations manager who'd been running the back office for a mid-sized firm and was ready for a new challenge. You're building something impressive here, Sarah said during her second week. Most consultants stay solo because they're afraid to share control. You're smart enough to recognize that leverage is how you scale. With my team in place, my work hours dropped from 60 to 40 per week while my income actually increased. The junior consultants handled the smaller clients and routine analyses. Sarah managed scheduling and invoicing, and I focused on the complex strategic work that commanded premium rates. I have evenings now, I told Daniel in wonder one Tuesday when I finished work at 5:30 instead of 9. Actual free time. What are you going to do with it? He asked. I have no idea. It's been so long since I wasn't exhausted or overwhelmed or drowning in responsibilities. We ended up taking a cooking class together, something neither of us had time for before. Learning to make fresh pasta from an Italian chef who insisted that cooking was about love and patience, not just following recipes. This is nice, Daniel said, elbow deep in flour and eggs. Doing something together that's just for fun, not necessity. It is nice, I agreed. This is what life can be when partnership is actually balanced. Patricia and James's transformation continued in surprising ways. They sold their large house and moved into a 2-bedroom condo in a walkable neighborhood. Patricia had started volunteering at a women's career center, helping other women transition back to work after years out of the workforce. I spent 40 years defining myself through my husband and son, she told me over coffee one Saturday. Now I'm trying to figure out who I am as just Patricia. It's terrifying and exciting at the same time. What made you decide to volunteer at the career center? I asked. Watching you, she admitted, seeing what women can accomplish when they're not constrained by outdated ideas about roles and responsibilities. I realized I'd internalized all these limiting beliefs about what women should be, and I'd been passing them on to younger women through my judgments and comments. I wanted to do something better, something that helped instead of hurt. That's admirable, I said sincerely. It's necessary, she corrected. I have decades of damage to atone for, not just to you, but to every young woman I look down on for not fitting my narrow definition of proper femininity. James had started teaching basic financial literacy classes at the community center, helping people understand budgeting and household finances. I let Patricia control our money for 40 years because I was too intimidated to learn, he explained. Now I'm helping other people avoid that mistake. The changes in Daniel's parents' marriage were rippling outward, affecting not just us, but their entire social circle. Other women in Patricia's former social group were asking how she'd become so confident, so independent. Other men were asking James how he'd finally found his voice after decades of silence. We tell them the truth, James said during one Sunday dinner at their new condo, that our daughter-in-law refused to accept being diminished, and in doing so, she showed us we'd been diminishing ourselves. I still can't believe you give me credit for your changes, I said. Why not? Patricia asked. You were the catalyst. The crisis you forced made us examine patterns we'd never questioned. That's powerful, Emma. Don't diminish it just because it wasn't your intention. My mother visited again in month 8, staying for a week to see how things had evolved. She was impressed by the changes in Daniel, suspicious of Patricia's transformation, and proud of my business growth. I never doubted you, she said one evening when we were alone, but I worried that marrying into the Mitchell family would require you to make yourself smaller to fit their expectations. I'm glad you refused. I almost didn't, I admitted. I came very close to just accepting things as they were, to convincing myself that the invisible labor and lack of recognition were just part of marriage, but you didn't accept it. That's the difference between surviving and thriving, Emma. Surviving is enduring what you're given. Thriving is demanding better. You taught me that, I said. Watching you work 3 jobs, raise 2 daughters alone, never complaining, but also never accepting less than you deserved. That was my model for strength. And you've exceeded it, she said warmly. You've built something I never managed, a truly equal partnership. That's rare and valuable. By month 10, our household had transformed so completely that the old dynamic seemed like a different lifetime. Daniel cooked dinner 3 nights a week, not because he had to, but because he enjoyed it. He managed half the household appointments and maintenance without being asked. He negotiated with service providers and tracked expenses in our joint account with the same diligence he applied to his corporate work. I actually like doing this stuff now, he admitted one evening. Not the cleaning, I still hate cleaning, but the managing, the organizing, the sense of maintaining something we've built together. It feels meaningful. That's because you see it now, I said. Before, household management was invisible work that just happened magically. Now you understand it's real labor that deserves recognition. More than recognition, he said. Respect, partnership, shared responsibility. Lauren got engaged that fall to Marcus, the man she'd been dating for 2 years. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and during one planning session, she brought up Patricia. Is it weird that I'm actually considering inviting your mother-in-law to the wedding? She asked. Like, I hated her for years for how she treated you. But now she's kind of becoming this feminist icon in her retirement. It's confusing. People can change, I said. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. Patricia did real work to understand why she behaved the way she did and to change those patterns. That deserves acknowledgement. Does it deserve a wedding invitation, though? That's up to you. But I will say that the Patricia who exists now is different from the Patricia who made my life miserable. Whether that difference is enough to earn a place at your wedding, only you can decide. Lauren ended up inviting Patricia, who attended with James and spent most of the reception talking to my mother about the challenges of unlearning internalized misogyny. It was the most surreal tableau I could have imagined a year ago. Patricia Mitchell and Diane Chen bonding over feminist theory. Your mother-in-law is quite impressive, my mother said later. Once you get past the years of problematic behavior and internalized patriarchy. She's doing the work, I agreed. That's what matters. Not that she was perfect, but that she's willing to change. As we approached the 1-year anniversary of Patricia's Scream, Daniel suggested we host a dinner to celebrate how far we'd come. Not a formal anniversary party, but an intimate gathering of the people who'd been part of our transformation. We invited Patricia and James, my mother and Lauren, and a few close friends who'd supported us through the crisis. Sarah from my company came too, having become a friend beyond just a colleague. A year ago, Daniel said when everyone was gathered in our living room, the living room that was now properly furnished with pieces we'd chosen together, my mother screamed in our kitchen. That scream was heard across the neighborhood and marked the lowest point in my marriage. Patricia flinched at the reminder, but didn't interrupt. That scream, Daniel continued, was also the best thing that could have happened to us. It forced a crisis that needed to happen. It shattered comfortable lies and demanded uncomfortable truths. It started a transformation that saved my marriage and changed multiple lives. He looked at me. Emma refused to accept being diminished. She demanded respect, transparency, and genuine partnership. And in doing so, she didn't just change me. She changed my parents' marriage, influenced how our friends think about household dynamics, and demonstrated that demanding better isn't selfish, it's necessary. To Emma, James raised his glass. For having the courage to break patterns that badly needed breaking. To Emma, Patricia echoed. For seeing me clearly enough to reject my judgment, and generously enough to allow me to grow. To my daughter, my mother added, who has always been stronger than she needed to be, but finally found a partnership where strength is shared instead of isolated. To partnership, I said, looking at Daniel, real partnership built on honesty, respect, and the willingness to do hard things instead of comfortable things. We clinked glasses and sat down to the meal Daniel and I had prepared together. Roasted chicken with herbs, roasted vegetables, homemade bread, and a dessert Sarah had contributed because she was a baker in her free time. This is lovely, Patricia said, and there was no comparison to restaurants or critique of techniques, just genuine appreciation for the meal and the company. As dinner progressed, conversation flowed naturally. Work successes and challenges, James's financial literacy classes, Patricia's volunteering, Lauren's wedding plans, my mother's retirement hobbies, normal family conversation without undercurrents of judgment or competition. I'm glad we're here, Patricia said as dessert was being served. Not just physically at this dinner, but emotionally in this place where we can be honest and kind with each other. A year ago, I would have said this was impossible. I would have insisted that family hierarchies and traditional roles were necessary for family cohesion. What changed your mind? Sarah asked, not knowing the full history, but sensing this was significant. Reality, Patricia said simply. Emma forced me to see reality instead of my comfortable fantasy about what my son's marriage looked like. That reality was painful, humiliating even, but it was also liberating. Once I stopped defending my worldview and started questioning it, everything opened up. Change is hard, James added, especially when you're older and your patterns are deeply ingrained. But it's possible if you're willing to be uncomfortable long enough to become different. After everyone left, Daniel and I cleaned up together. Our established routine of washing and drying and putting away while discussing the evening. That went well, he said. It did, I agreed. Who would have thought a year ago that we'd have my mother and your mother bonding over feminist theory? Who would have thought a year ago that I'd understand what a household budget actually requires? He paused, dish towel in hand. Emma, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for demanding I become worthy of being your partner. Thank you for saving us. We saved us, I corrected. I demanded change, yes, but you did the actual changing. That was your work, your growth, your choice to be better. Partnership, he said. Partnership, I agreed. As we finished the last of the dishes, I reflected on the past year. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments of frustration, times when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, but we'd built something real, something sustainable, something that honored both of us as individuals while supporting us as partners. Patricia's scream had shattered comfortable illusions about our marriage, but from those shattered pieces, we'd constructed something better. Not perfect, because real life is never perfect, but honest, equitable, and genuinely loving in a way that required seeing each other clearly instead of through filters of assumption and expectation. The financial abuse that Daniel and I had unknowingly participated in, me by hiding my contributions, him by dismissing them, was over. The family betrayal that Patricia had enacted by turning her son against against his wife had been acknowledged and addressed. The separate finances experiment had taught lessons that went far beyond money, into the fundamental nature of respect and partnership. And now, standing in our kitchen with Daniel beside me as an actual equal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete peace with my choices, my life, my marriage. You know what I realized today? Daniel said as we turned off the kitchen lights. What's that? A year ago, if someone had asked me to describe my wife, I would have said you were supportive, accommodating, easygoing, all the words that really mean convenient. He took my hand. Now, if someone asks, I say you're strong, successful, uncompromising, in the best way. You're not convenient, Emma. You're extraordinary, and I'm finally smart enough to appreciate that. That's the best compliment you could give me, I said softly. Not that I'm easy to live with, but that I'm worth the effort of being a real partner. You are, he said. Absolutely worth it. We walked upstairs together, partners in truth and not just in name. Architects of a life we'd both chosen instead of one we'd drifted into through assumption and convenience. The separate finances experiment had ended months ago, but its lessons remained. Our household budget was shared, but our understanding of what partnership required went far beyond money. It required visibility, acknowledgement, respect, and the courage to demand better instead of accepting good enough. Patricia had asked, in her moment of humiliation, what I contributed to the household. The real answer was everything, but more importantly, I'd contributed the refusal to let my everything be dismissed as nothing. That refusal had transformed not just my marriage, but an entire family's understanding of worth and partnership and the invisible labor that makes comfortable lives possible. And in the end, that was the true success story. Not revenge, not vindication, but transformation. From invisible to visible, from dismissed to respected, from convenient to valued, from a marriage built on assumptions to a partnership built on truth. That night, as I fell asleep beside my husband, who had finally learned to see me, I felt the deep satisfaction of someone who had demanded better and received it. Not because it was given freely, but because I'd refused to accept less. Some lessons require crisis to learn. Some patterns require breaking before they can be rebuilt correctly. Some partnerships require nearly ending before they can truly begin. We'd done all three. And on the other side of that painful transformation, we'd found something rare and valuable. A genuinely equal partnership. Hard-won and deeply appreciated by both people who'd fought to create it. The neighbors probably still talked about Patricia's scream. That Sunday morning when something shattered in the Chen household. Let them talk. They had no idea that the shattering was the beginning of something far stronger than what had existed before. And that's how a scream in my kitchen became the catalyst for building the life I'd always deserved but had never demanded. Until I finally understood that demanding better wasn't selfish. It was the only way to survive with dignity and tact. So what do you think of this story? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect your contributions? Have you experienced the invisible labor of managing a household while working full-time? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled similar situations in your own life. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real stories about standing up for yourself and demanding the respect you deserve. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Your support means everything.